Hi, this is Margaret Hopkins, Superintendent of Grand County School District, and welcome to our weekly update. As you know, we've been talking about school funding, and this is a continuing process, and so whatever we talk about today, if you have questions, go back to previous videos because it's explained in previous videos. But I want to start with a very brief review, and then today spend a little bit of time talking about how our education system in Utah is supported at the federal, state, and local levels. And so just as a review, and this will be very quick, in any given year, if this were our funding for the year, most of our funding is paid, it comes in what we call the general fund, and that pays for salaries and benefits of our employees. Another major category of funds that come in are what we call restricted funds. A lot of this is what we call capital outlay. It goes toward building, remodeling, repair, and upkeep. And this money is restricted, meaning it can only be spent in this way on our buildings or whatever the restriction is on that fund. So, and the state does allow for each district, if the community wants to add to the total dollars available for the schools, they can vote locally to put in place what's called a voted leeway. And this is just extra money that the community wants to put toward its own school district. And next I'd like to talk about how we get our funds in Utah for our schools. So now we have a blank board, and what I want to do is just talk about if we drew a pie graph, our pie graph would look something like this. 7% of the money for our education in Utah comes from the federal government. About 71% of the funding is state funded, and 22% is funded through local property tax. And so this is one thing to understand, as we're looking at our funding, we're not getting a lot of funding from the federal government. Most of it comes from the state. And then we do have a responsibility locally for some of our funding. And what I want to talk about really is this local piece right here. So what we want to do now is connect this chart back to what we just learned. And remember, we have two funds, the general and the restricted, that make up our funds each year. If we take the general fund and put it here, if you go to the Utah State Office of Education website, what you'll see are these percentages that the feds put in 7%, the state puts in 71%, locally we supply 22%. Well, this is of our general fund. So this is talking about the amount of money that we're all putting in toward basically salaries and benefits. What we also need to look at, however, is our restricted funds, because they're also an important part of our funding. And if we add this on, our pie chart will change. And so I'll redraw our pie chart. And this pie chart will now represent all of our funds here. And so if we add our restricted funds, the restricted funds are capital outlay, transportation, recreation, which we'll talk about, but the feds put in now only about 3% of all of our total funding. The state pays about 57%. So we'll put state and locally we're putting in about 40%. So you can see how the pie chart changes if we look at the whole scenario of our funding. And in our next week, what I want to focus on is just this local piece and how what we do locally with our tax levies either give us flexibility to meet our own needs or don't. And so we'll be talking about that next week. But before we stop, I guess I want to leave the community, everyone, with a question. And that is, as I've been superintendent now for 2.5 years, I've really felt like that there's sort of in some segments of the community, there's a them against us mentality, and the them is the school district, because the school district takes so much in tax dollars. And so a couple of things. Number one, I really don't see it as a them against us. I mean, the community is its school district. They fund the districts according to state law. This is really the only way the schools can be funded, and it's real important to work together, because the schools that are reflected in what the community's opinions are. And so that's why we're spending so much time right now with the board talking to the community. We want to really figure out what we want our schools to look like. The them against us mentality is really, in my opinion, not healthy, because there is not such a thing. We just make that up, and really the them is us. The community elects the school board members. The school board members hire the administration, and we as a district are an arm of the community to carry out what the community wants in terms of education for its children. And so I'll leave with those ideas, and then next week what we'll do is come back and talk about this local piece of the school funding and what our responsibility would be in terms of arranging this so that it's reflecting in a way that will meet our own needs. So we'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, you can go to our website www.grandschools.org and check out all of the latest information about the work that the board and the school district's doing.